So welcome everyone to Poets Time. It's a beautiful day out there today. We're in December, and yeah, happy day. It's been announced this morning that the vaccine has been approved for COVID-19. So all fingers crossed for a beautiful spring for us all. We can be back out. But meanwhile, December hits, as I said, so I think we can start thinking a little bit about Christmas with some positive vibes. And I'm very positive today because I've got a brilliant writer with me, and she's a girl that works in film. She's been a great class member. I've had good fortune to teach her or work with her in a class here in the South Side, and she's a great addition to that group. This is Libby McInnes.
Morning, Linda. Thanks very much for having me with you this morning, Poets Time. It's been a pleasure working with you this year in a very strange 2020, and the classes that we've had in person and primarily on Zoom this year have been great. So I'm going to kick off with a couple of poems. This first one is called Blue Morning, and I wrote it a couple of years ago as part of a uni assignment when I studied creative writing at Strathclyde Uni. Blue Morning. You'll have plenty of time to write stories when you're on the dole. That's what your mum told you some years before, and you repeated back to me last night. Maybe you're right, but while you're in the shower, I can't help but write one about you. And now, right now, as the keyboard floats under chipped, purple fingernails, and I'm tempted by ambiguous words or grand phrases to define us, I am lost. I close my eyes, but your face slides quickly between the unknown cracks we've yet to fill. The crinkles around your green eyes, with a small black dot on the left, are there too, and your newly straightened teeth, with the little hidden tooth gems you showed me that first morning in Kelvin Grove Park at 5 AM with the skateboarders, are there too. And even as you stand on the other side of the wall I'm looking toward, altogether I can't find a single face that I can assemble without it slipping into fragments. But this blue morning, as you slept, hands nestled under your chin, with the neatly trimmed beard which you confess you grew for me, and with our noses almost touching, I found you. Your breathing is deep and peaceful, and I try and match the rhythm so I can drift off too. And as your warm breath blows in my face without a sour hint of last night's gin and cranberry, I wish more than anything I could stay here like this forever. And the next poem that I'm going to read out, I'll read out the first half. This is called Fear, and this was written at the start of lockdown, so around February, March time. And this was an assignment that Linda gave our class, and I really enjoyed the theme of fear and looking at different fears, whether it be bigger things or smaller things in everyday life. So this is Fear. I fear that no one is listening to themselves, to me, to each other. I fear reading the news. I fear hearing the news. I fear herbs stuck in my teeth when talking to that boy at the gym. I fear being left high up on that shelf, dusty and forgotten. I fear that default setting of never being good enough. I fear there will be no menu options that are high in protein. I fear being bloated up by creamy cheese and carbs. I fear the scuttle of mice entitled on these tenement floors. I fear our universal fear of being vulnerable with each other. I fear one day losing my hearing, trapped inside this creaky skull. I fear that my best friend will marry the wrong person. I fear that I don't care if he never messages me back. Thanks, Linda.
That was fantastic. I love that fear poem. And one of the things I think that we've been talking about, and I think I see in your poems, there's quite a lot of that worry about loss, you know, and the blue morning poem, which is a beautiful tribute to love itself. You know, I always remember the Elizabeth Barrett Browning poem about love, where she says, if you remember me for nothing, don't remember my smile or the wee cute things I did, just remember me for love itself. Yeah. And that poem felt like that to me, you know, that glance when someone's in their most vulnerable state, and the vulnerability you feel by being in love seems to calm, you know, because everything's all right, or they're asleep. I don't know what way to look at that. But I think the loss there and the found, when you say I found you in that beautiful moment, but the loss, when the person could seem to detail everything about them, you know, the little dot, the crinkles in the eyes and all that kind of thing, they felt they were there, but just going into the shower already brings a certain amount of anxiety that they're gone, you know. And I think sometimes, especially probably after a night together or whatever, that separating is very, very difficult. But I felt there was a strong feeling of loss going alongside the found things to do to capture the detail of a person. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I really like looking back at that poem, and it was a very, very sort of distinct feeling. And part of the way that I write poetry as well is to kind of remember specific, not, you know, it doesn't have to be big things, but that's a really sort of definite feeling of kind of first love for me. And I think that there's something in sort of all those details, and there's that thing as well where I feel like sometimes when you think of somebody's face and it's kind of, you can remember bits but you can't assemble the full thing. But also reading that back, feel like there's an element of, there's definitely loss in there, and you know, there's maybe a slight sense of foreboding, even though that was written at a time with best intentions for a new relationship. But I think that there's something as well about looking at someone and really studying them, and even though there's lots of little parts of that person, it's the idea that you can maybe see someone clearer than they can see themselves as well. And there is that vulnerability, and when someone is very close to you, you know, especially if they're kind of sleeping and you're just watching them and studying them. But I really like that idea that you can look at someone and there's the surface, but there's also what you can see beneath.
Yeah,
they may not be able to see themselves.
What a lovely idea. And you know, even if it's not true that you can see things they can't see themselves, it's very comforting to think you can.
Yeah.
It does take away any fear of loss right away. You've captured them for a moment, you know. But I think that was a beautiful poem. And the thing with loss, again, the I Fear poem, and I know you've got another part of that to do, but it's very, very powerful poem, especially in COVID times, but it crosses that. You know, there's elements of other things that have, obviously, as you were saying before you started, it's small details and then the bigger things. But there's a lot of, for me, there was quite a lot of worry in that part of it about self-esteem, you know, what your physical presentation to the world, about the herbs in your teeth, or you might not be good enough in general, or you might be left on the shelf, unlikely, may I say, or you might eat things that are high in protein and carbs, and there's this worry, you know, that you won't be presenting physically how you would like to. And I wondered if you wanted to say something about how you think, I mean, I worked for women's studies for a long time at Strathclyde, and I still do. That's a major way I read the world. And I'm concerned, you know, I've got young granddaughters. I'm concerned to see if, you know, some of the work we did looking at the beauty industry and its impacts on young women, or the way young women see themselves in the world, it actually doesn't seem to be getting that much better, which worries me a lot. But I wonder, as a younger woman, what you thought about that, Libby?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. It's something that I feel like I've had quite an interesting journey with. And, you know, when I look back, I feel like a lot of my writing is quite reflective. But I like writing feeling like I'm not ruminating, but looking back really to understand. So specifically for sort of self-esteem and, you know, how a woman visually is and how she carries herself. For me, it's an interesting topic because I was very overweight in my teens, And really it's only been probably for the last 10 years that I've been able to kind of turn my life around in that way, and you know, look at how when I was kind of in my late teens, early 20s, the word I would use was I felt very invisible, specifically to kind of males. And because I looked, ironically, I felt invisible, but I was as big as a house. But so it's been an interesting journey to have that in my teens and up to my 20s. And then for as I say, for the last 10 years, having a kind of different experience of carrying myself in a certain way, and I do that, and I look after myself more from the side of I want to feel healthy. It's not aesthetic. It's not for other people to make a judgment on. You know, I like to lift weights and I like to do running when I run into you in the park, but that's for my own. That's my own needs. That's not for someone to look on and cast any sort of judgment. But I think you're right in that. My thing with it is that I just think a lot about the kind of lost art of females, and because there's so much time spent on how they might look or how they, you know, should appear in a certain way, and a sort of strive for perfection and to look a certain way and to act a certain way, you know, to behave and to be perfect. I'm not interested in any of that stuff because my granny taught me very different. And so I just think about, I think a little bit about the time that's maybe wasted on all that, rather than developing themselves as human beings, you know, and volunteering or striving for different kind of jobs, or really reaching for something, or, you know, playing music or writing. You know, I by no means, I've always found writing to be a really good release since I take it up at uni when I was in my teens, and you know, it's something that I feel is a big part of my life, and I get a lot of confidence from writing and getting feedback from you and from the rest of the group. And you know, I'd never proclaim myself to be a poet as such, but it's another part of me. It's not just, and I think that, you know, the way that someone looks is only a small percentage.
Yeah, I would claim you're a poet. I would definitely claim that you're a poet. But yeah, I think, you know, it's admirable that you that really gives me a lot of comfort, you know, that I hear that, because I mean, for me growing up was an accident. I grew up with brothers. I was quite tomboyish, and I've played music since I was 14. So diving about in bands, and you know, you don't really get time and you don't really think too much about it. And yeah. I was the opposite. I was almost invisible skinny when I was that age. So that was the comments I would get, you know, from people. Yeah. And it was very negative as well, you know, because it was just Olive Oil's wee sister running around the place. But it didn't really bother me too much, because I was very, very engaged with studying, and I was very engaged with music and writing. And I remember, I think I was saying to you, I was travelling in Hollywood with Janice Galloway. We were working a book together at the time about her, and it was great fun. But we were going out this night, and I remember just saying, I was just watching you, you've got no idea what to do with mascara. And I looked at it and I said, what can you actually learn to do with mascara, you know? But she started to explain how to apply it, you know. I would just burst out laughing because, you know, it didn't mean anything to me. And because I work in music as well, the amount of times I've had band members' wives, girlfriends, or friends saying, you know, like when I was younger, maybe up on a big stage, I can't believe that you don't really rip the shit out of it. Why do you not go and get really great clothes? Or, you know, what is it that you don't want to really invest in that kind of stuff? And I don't actually think it's anything very profound. It's a matter of time and where your head's at, you know. I mean, I would literally let other people say, why don't you buy that, or what about that, you know. But I think it's really gratifying for me to hear you talk that way, you know, that it's just, and you will know lots of people as well who think the same. And I think the beauty industry has got a lot to answer for, you know.
Yeah, I think certainly for my age, and I feel quite lucky not to have really grown up where image was everything, and that when I was young I didn't have a phone until I was 13, and I think that, not to demonize social media or smartphones or anything like that, but I think they have a lot to answer to as well, because I think particularly for females, the rhetoric is to make them feel bad about themselves, because if they feel bad about themselves, the chances are they will probably buy more. And it's a constant cycle. And so I think if you can take a step away from that and think there's more to me than just the way that I look, I've got hopefully more to offer the world than that, because looks will go, mine are starting to slide already. As soon as you hit 30, they're gone. And so you just think, well, what's beyond that? There has to be something else. There has to be for me. And as I say, that's part of the way I've grown up with a lot of strong women in my life. And it's never been just about the way that you would look. And I think it's a bit boring, to be honest.
Yeah, it's quite tedious, and it doesn't really bring back many returns, whereas writing your poetry gives lots of returns for us out here and also for you. So I'm going to get back to you, Libby, and hear some more of your own work, and I'm hoping you're going to maybe read the other part of I Fear.
Yeah, I will continue I Fear just now. I fear that I am unable to live ignorantly blissful ever again. I fear for those lost boys, unaware and running for eternity. I fear not living, but merely surviving, head bobbing in clouds. I fear not taking the time to meditate every day, as is recommended. I fear 10 siblings becoming 9 and being the last one remaining here. I fear having another filling. One is quite enough, thank you very much. I fear leaving this place and my only legacy being 2 curly-haired children. I fear finally having to sacrifice my earplugs for intimacy in the bedroom. I fear seeing one dancing magpie unaccompanied by another. I fear the thoughts looming at 4 a.m. in the morning, insomnia creeping. I fear an unfinished novel. I fear an unfinished life. I fear that I'm an island and I might always be. I fear the ultimate leap before being pushed. And above all, I fear that still no one is listening. And I'm going to finish off with a series of cinquain poems. So this was another exercise that we had in your class, Linda, which I really enjoyed. I liked the kind of idea of restriction and looking at kind of places and how they made you feel, and using very kind of minimal words as part of that exercise. So here are a few of these cinquains. Kelvin Bridge, ground floor, walking on eggshells, never allowed to belong, abandoned. Sky, precipice looming, distracted by photographs, fake smiles forever frozen, irretrievable. Battlefield, south, safe, small box room, escape from West End, secure. Copenhagen, alone, single, inhaling clean air, learning to be kind. Hygge. Canterbury, eastern, hidden, speeding on mopeds. You brought me back. Freedom. South side, familiar, nostalgic. Queen's Park blooming. My side of Glasgow, unafraid.
Well, happily it's my side of Glasgow, so God, the West End gets it there, Libby. That's a few customers for. I think these poems are just wonderful, and they also, there's a lost and found thing there as well, all the way through them, you know, the kind of loss of security, and then the finding security, and then the, you know, being abroad, finding freedom, the freedom to come back, which I think is a lovely idea. I used to travel quite a bit, and you would meet people from certain countries who didn't really happy being there, and then they would go here, there and everywhere, and then they would say it's time to go home, you know. And they felt that strongly, you know, and there's a real strong sense that we're building up to home in that poem, that series of poems. You feel it, you can feel the person growing as they move around, and not that, oh, this is good, you know. But I think that line where you say freedom and then, you know, bringing me back, you know, there's something that, beautiful work. And the other part of the fear poem, there's quite a toing and froing in this, I think, a beautiful toing and froing between the need for intimacy and the fear of it, and the loss of independence and the giving yourself away thing. And there's also something about the loss of potential. I felt, you know, this idea that you're going to, you know, while two curly-haired children will be lovely, you don't want that to be your entire legacy. And that idea no one is listening and no one's reading. There is someone in there who want to get something out, you know, the unfinished novel. And I think, you know, that there's two main things that came across to me in that, and that's what they were. This idea of, you know, lost and found, you know, giving up your earplugs for intimacy in the bedroom. I fear that. Well, actually, you wouldn't if it was anything like the description you gave in the Blue Morning. You wouldn't mind throwing the...
No.
You know, let's be honest. But I think, you know, once bitten and all this, or many times bitten in my case, you know, heavens, I'm coughing a lot. Terror. Yeah, that idea as well, which again comes back to the giving up your headphones, and in the one half you don't want to give up your headphones to be intimate, but then you're saying I'm frightened to become an island with no one to listen. So I think there's a lovely contradiction playing through these poems from almost all that you've read. Beautiful contradictions about becoming close and independently able and pursuing yourself. And these are, I think, at my age and with the life I've led, I think I'm so glad it's been as contradictory as it has. It's yielded a lot of interesting times, but yeah, it's a risk. You know, there is that risk of sacrificing. But you'll do all of it, Libby. You'll do all of it. And I hope you do all of it and bring the curly-haired children back to Battlefield in the South Side whenever the time comes.
Well, that's cool, yeah.
We need to see a poetry book of yours out. I hope you're going to get a collection of your own work, because it is really a joy to read. I've been reading your work now for a couple of years, and more or less everything that comes in I'm always struck by. So hopefully that you'll go on and make sure you get the novels out, get, you know, plenty of time. But definitely I think a poetry collection's first on the horizon. What do you think? Go on.
It's funny, you think the word poet and you see someone sitting high up on a hill with a quill and writing away. But I do you know, working with you in the last couple of years as well, and being exposed to different types of poetry, and you know, those cinquains, I would never have even known what that word was for those travel poems, and just having prompts that make you think, right, you know, what do I fear? We'd done a similar exercise for your class, speaking about unknown as well, which was great. I really enjoyed that, and especially this time of year. And we had the time just to think, right, what is it that I'm scared of? What is it that I fear the most? And to actually lean into that. And I think that anyone that I've shown my poetry to, it still feels strange for me to say my poetry, but I'll accept it. Okay, I'm a poet then. I always just write from the heart, really, and I think being very vulnerable and very honest is something that I've had to be more comfortable with doing in the last few years, and I think that's how you really, you know, it sounds like a cliche, but it's how you get to know yourself a bit more as well, and really leaning into that vulnerability. And you can see, I've found as well from people's reactions to what I've written, that it's hit a nerve in them, and it's struck a chord, you know,
and
whether
that's
it be...
because, Libby, it's because of what you said there. It's coming from an honest place. You know, I think style and the way people present things, if it isn't coming from who you are, with the honesty of that, it won't work. It doesn't work, and it doesn't strike home. It sounds constructed. I mean, poetry is constructed, but the initial impetus and the initial themes and things that you're going to come out with, and using your own background and everything about the way you speak and write and keeping that honest and close to yourself, that's what will yield the impact on another person.
Yeah, and I think actually there's, I'm always listening to podcasts and TED Talks, and there's one, I can't recall the name of it at the moment, but the woman was saying that the only gift we've really got to give to the world is our own story and our own experience, what our window in the world is. And actually, when you put that out there, it can be frightening. It can be quite, scary to be as vulnerable and to put yourself out there and to think, I don't want people to judge me in a certain way. But when you put it out there and people react, and they react in a way that it said that it's really touched them, then you're hitting on something. The best, you think about the best music is people telling their own stories and telling things from their point of view. And if you are honest with any walk of life, I don't think you can go wrong. And actually, some of the things that I've written about have been quite painful, but in being able to get them out, they're no longer in as well. And when they're out, and I think if they can help one person in one way, then it's never going to have been a bad thing, just because.
Well, of course. I mean, think how many times you sit with your headphones on with a song that you absolutely adore, and somebody wrote it in the other side of the planet, from a heartfelt place, and that's why it's managed to do that for you. But that's what I'm saying. Most of the poetry I've read from yours, it's quite an immediate impact, and I think it's vulnerability and strength and vulnerability, which comes across very, very powerfully. But thank you very much for being here today, and I think we can now say it. And you've got a nice red jumper on, so I can say Happy Christmas.
Thank you, Linda. Merry Christmas to you too.
Oh my God, it's time to put the trees out and time for the baubles. Have a good weekend ahead.
And same to you, Linda. Thanks so much for having me today.
Bye-bye. So thanks very much for joining us here in Poets Time today. That was a lovely Libby McInnes, talented and beautiful heart as well, which you heard. So thanks very much to her again. And we'll see you next time. Maybe this year, but possibly 2021.